Hello, everyone. We are live and welcome back to Young Guns. I'm here with my partner in crime, Jackson, and we're here with diehard Husky, Sargent Pickles. Thanks so much for coming on, and thank you for your service, good sir.
How's it going, everybody?
So, going into the season with Kalen DeBoer and bringing in Michael Penix, what were the expectations for the Huskies?
It was a lot of, how most fan bases feel getting a new head coach. You look at their past track record, and in Kalen DeBoer's case, there was a lot of positive. I mean, basically everywhere he's gone, he's had successful seasons. He's had quarterback talent. And it was really a debate of, well, you get the classic, can he do it at a big program? Can he
Yeah.
come to a major university and really succeed? And, credit to Jen Cohen because she made the call to move on from Jimmy Lake, and she knew exactly the guy she wanted to come in. And people kind of made a big deal about this. I thought it was interesting. When they introduced Kalen DeBoer, actually Chris Peterson came to the press conference and was up there on stage. And it was almost like a vote of confidence, from the university saying, this is our guy, get behind him. It might be kind of a tough year. You never know going into a first season, but there's plenty of things to be excited about. As for Penix, it's exactly what they said coming out of Indiana. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay upright? Because when he was rocking and actually upright, he could throw it against the Ohio States, the Michigans. He could put up numbers against the best teams when he was actually healthy.
What's your take on Michael Penix returning for the 2023 season? Do you think that helps Washington in their chances of winning the Pac-12 next year?
Absolutely. I mean, it's seeing at the talent coming into the Pac-12. I think it's actually going to be one of the most interesting conferences for that title race going into the end of it, because I could honestly see 5 or 6 different teams truly fighting for the Pac-12 title and possibly even fighting for a playoff and major bowl games. Penix, I don't think anyone, if they were telling the truth, would have told you they'd expected second in the nation in passing, but they all knew he could compete at this level. Their performance against Oregon, I think, really stands out. I mean, anytime you perform in that moment against a big rival, he threw, I think, what was it, 2 or 3 passes of 60-plus yards, including 2 touchdowns. He was absolutely just slinging it down the field. So it's just an amazing season. And not that he should have won the Heisman, but for him not to at least be in New York, I think is kind of a joke considering some of the guys that were there. It's just my 2 cents.
Mm-hmm. So did the confidence in the team after the Michigan State game, is that what made you guys believe that you could compete for the Pac-12 and be up there with the Ducks and with the Trojans?
I think the way they beat Michigan State, and obviously the Spartans went on to not have the best season, but anytime you can kick off the year and I forget the exact final score, but it was a 2-score game. Michigan State was not coming back with several minutes to play. It was a pretty handy defeat by the Huskies, and anytime you put that kind of performance together, it really gets you pumped up about the season that's about to come. I think that was definitely the first moment where you're like, they're on to something. They could really do some damage this year. Before that game and going into the season, I actually was more optimistic than some. I thought if they beat Michigan State, they would go 8-5, and if they lost, 8-4. If they lost, they were going to go 7-5. And there were some people that thought they wouldn't even get to 7 wins. So for them to go 10-2 and have an incredible season, definitely exceeded expectations.
Mm-hmm. And there's like a little bumpy road there with UCLA, and then you guys really should have won that game in Tempe, but I know it can be tricky going in the desert.
Yeah, I don't think most Norwich fans outside of the Pac-12 realize I forget the exact crazy statistic, but it was something like for more than a decade, the Huskies hadn't won a game in the state of Arizona. We've beaten the Wildcats and Sun Devils in Seattle, but they never win in Arizona for some reason. And it came true this year. There were some factors in that game. About 3/4 of the starting secondary was injured. But there's enough depth and talent on this team that to not perform in that, there's really no excuse for it. You can stomach the UCLA loss, especially in context of the season. They're a good team. you gave them a good fight down to the end, and UCLA made plays at the finish to win the game. You can stomach that loss, but to not perform against the Sun Devils, that was what truly made the difference between them being Pac-12 title contenders and just having a pretty good season.
Mm-hmm.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest, well, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, where would you rate the 2022 Washington season?
For me, at least an 8 or 9 out of 10. It can't be a 10 when you have that ASU loss. 10 out of 10 is, winning the Pac-12 and possibly going on to a playoff. I mean, we've been to a playoff before. That should be the, standard we set against ourselves. We're not going full Alabama and, throwing our hands up if we don't make it every year, but we're capable of that level of play. So that's a 10 out of 10. Beating Oregon is at least worth, a good chunk of that. You can have a horrible season, and if you beat your rival, it makes all the difference in the world. So eight and a half, 9 out of 10, it's definitely up there.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the strengths and weaknesses that Washington has that people need to look out for when watching the Alamo Bowl versus Texas?
I'm not sure too much in the context of Texas and what they can counter us with, but Penix and the receivers. I don't know off the top of my head, but I can't imagine there's too many Power 5 schools that had 2 1,000-yard receivers. We have multiple receiver threats, so it's not like Penix is just throwing it up to one guy. Both Odunze, McMillan, and even Polk had 600 yards. He's our third receiver. So there's threats all over the field. Westover is underrated. He does a lot of good work in blocking as a tight end, but he's good for first downs when you really need him. And the running game, it's more balanced than people would think. You're not seeing crazy runs and breaking off yards, but it's more like the tight end and running backs are complementing the passing down the field. They're getting that 2-3 yards when you really need it to keep the offense moving. So when Penix is on, I truly believe they can compete with anybody. On the defensive side, there's definitely been some injuries and, not quite as good as the awesome secondaries that Washington's had in the past few years, the number 1 overall or number 1 first round draft pick type corners and safeties. There's still a lot of athleticism and talent. We've had some really good transfer players coming in like Cam Bright, but the defensive end, the edge rushers are still very capable of getting after it and competing with top offensive lines. So if they can get that pass rushing against Texas, they can definitely have an impact.
Mm-hmm. And what was the feeling like after that really good close game against the Beavs? Was there hope going into the game against the Ducks? Like, what was the feeling?
There's always hope. I'm definitely, I'm not one to shy away from saying Austin is an intimidating place. It's an amazing atmosphere, and you knew that Oregon had a good team going in. They always have outstanding athletes. It was definitely a rough stretch there for the Huskies. I think it was 12 straight we lost, but I definitely thought we had a chance. It was kind of funny. I was actually in Germany at the time for the Seahawks game. So I go to bed right before the game starts. I wake up and see the final score, and it just blew my mind, kind of seeing the way it all unfolded and how high scoring it was. Because I thought if the Huskies were going to win it, it was going to be, keep it close, keep it low scoring, win on some crazy play, get a few breaks here and there. But Penix absolutely turned it on and just slung it down the field against the Ducks. And they answered as best they could, but they had weird timeout errors and fourth down calls that really didn't make a ton of sense. Some people, it was partially the Ducks shooting themselves in the foot, but Washington capitalized. And like as you said, coming off the win against Oregon State, that was just a crazy weather, 30-mile-an-hour wind, raining, sloppy game. And that's the kind of game like ASU that you expect to win, but that was the one that if it went wrong, I wouldn't have been shocked if we actually dropped that game to Oregon State because it was absolutely down to the wire.
Mm-hmm. Of course. And so how is the pass defense looking for the Huskies? Do you think, because they have a good quarterback as well? So like what are you looking at in terms of preparing for Quinn Ewers and all those receivers that they have at Texas.
Yeah. Texas, I mean, maybe not in specific, but in general, strikes me as an Oregon. They always have outstanding athletes. They're always going to have those top recruits. It's whether or not they can put it all together. So I don't think it'll be anything necessarily that the Huskies haven't faced with just the quarterback and receiver talent that we have in the Pac-12. I mean, they've played against some great offenses. I say secondary is definitely perhaps not a weakness, but it's just not as strong as it has been in years past. They've really leaned on that secondary to make plays in previous seasons. It's more just if they can hold on long enough for those good edge rushers to get home, can they cover long enough? Because Quinn Ewers is very capable of just picking them apart. He's done it against other teams. He is somewhat Bo Nix-like in that I think he can have Jekyll and Hyde moments. You don't know if you're getting the good or bad version of him. So they're kind of a weird parallel in that way. Guys like Asa Turner, he's a really, really good player. He can come up and absolutely thump guys and make plays over the middle from safety. But he has been prone to giving up some really bad targeting penalties. So it's that kind of razor's edge of you want to, set the tone and send a message. But if you get thrown out in the first quarter, how much good are you really, really doing your team?
Oh, yeah. So how much of a fresh air is this offense compared to Jimmy Lake's and John Donovan's offense from last year?
Oh man, it's night and day. And there was a lot of pessimism with Jimmy Lake. I mean, Lake is a defensive guy, so we knew it wasn't really going to be the ultimate focus. But to just see it regress so much compared to how it looked under Peterson. I mean, Peterson's considered one of the great offensive wizards, of the past, several decades. And you see the creativity, you see kind of the balance, even though he wants to throw it down the field. And Jimmy Lake was just so vanilla. And then the craziest part that I didn't totally understand, especially in comparison last year to this year, is that they have roughly the same offensive line. They have a lot of similar returning players, or they've, upgraded, or guys have moved on. But the line play is just night and day different. And I'm sure that has to do with the scheme being, quick to read and quick to get the ball out, because Penix is getting it, making his, 1 to 2 reads and just absolutely firing. And that wasn't happening under Dylan Morris, and he was just getting crushed. So it's night and day different. And I definitely give Jen Cohen, the AD, a lot of credit. She identified really quickly that Jimmy Lake was not going to be able to turn it around even with a full off season.
Yeah. So how do you think that the team's going to do next year? Like, is everyone coming back, or are there going to be some guys that are going to need to be replaced?
I want to say, I mean, they have a decent class coming in. I mean, it is Kalen DeBoer's kind of first real. He's had a full recruiting cycle class. I want to say it's top 30 overall. They've got some pretty interesting transfers coming in. There's not a ton of outgoing transfer talent that's super concerning. I want to say it's Jeremiah Martin. We're losing one of our good edge rushers. He's declared for the NFL draft. But our receivers, our linebackers, ZTF, our other really, really good kind of hybrid safety linebackers returning. Our outstanding receivers are returning. So I think a lot of guys are believing in the project and looking at it like, hey, we can take this. And, despite having a 10-win season, we're looking to bigger and better things. This group's capable of, competing for the Pac-12 championship and perhaps more. A big thing, I know Oregon got the rant and rave reviews on signing day, but it was actually a huge thing for the Huskies. They flipped the number 1 player out of the state of Washington. He's from the Seattle area, Caleb Presley. He's a 4-star defensive back, committed to Oregon, and he flipped at the last minute. The hometown hero angle, it's maybe a little overplayed at times, but it absolutely makes a difference. And I think it shows confidence in guys to say, we can look past Nike U, not just the flashy branding, all the money. It's like Washington is capable of playing, big time ball if you just give it a chance.
How fun do you think it is to play? Pete Kwiatkowski is now at Texas. How fun do you think it is for Husky fans? Maybe the Husky fans out there will heckle him a bit for leaving and going to Texas.
Yeah, Kwiatkowski and the Sark Bowl. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like quite a bit of the. I think there's other assistants also that were under Washington at different points.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much that factors into it. I'm sure it'll be talked about ad nauseum from different media people. Um, sorry, just 1 second. Yeah, it'll be talked about a lot. Kwiatkowski had some amazing, he was part of that really good run that they had. Sarkisian was actually in, post Willingham when they went 0-12. He really brought Washington back to being a respectable program. That was the Jake Locker era. They went to the Holiday Bowl. It was their first bowl win, and I think over a decade. So Sark gets a lot of he's looked at fondly from Husky fans about kind of restoring them back to being at least a mid-level, respectable, power program. So it'll be very interesting. I mean, any Husky fan would be lying to you if they said they didn't want to beat him. I don't think there was a lot of bad blood when he left. It kind of, different things happened and unfolded, and I think he needed to change and Washington needed to change. They had kind of stagnated under him and hit a ceiling. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun to see what they cook up. I wouldn't be surprised to see some crazy trick plays or trick formations and just some wacky stuff going on.
So yeah, it's going to be pretty fun watching the Alamo. Do you think that Washington was somewhat kind of left out of a New Year's Six Bowl this year?
I blame Utah. Utah really screwed it up for everybody. Credit to them for beating SC, but it was not that it's a guarantee or anything like that. But there was a very good chance if SC wins and moves on to the playoff, Washington is getting selected for that Rose Bowl over an Oregon, over a Utah. They had an outstanding season. And there would have even been an argument I even saw some people predicting certain scenarios where USC goes to the playoff, Washington gets picked for a Rose Bowl, and either Oregon or Utah goes to the Orange Bowl. It would have been a dream setup for the Pac-12 if they perform. It was out of our hands. I mean, the Arizona loss or the ASU loss kind of took the power out of our hands to choose our own destiny in that way. So it was kind of funny. We were in the weird scenario where it's like we could still make it if Cal or UCLA won, but we had to have weird, other crazy certain results go our way. But again, going back to the beginning of the season, if you said we're in the conversation to make the playoff and in theory, or not the playoff, but the Pac-12 championship and get selected for a New Year's Six, everyone would have taken that 10 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
it'd be nice to win another Rose Bowl again in my lifetime. That'd be great.
Well, I think maybe next year's the year.
Yeah.
With
maybe
we'll get certainly possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this is this year will be like the last Rose Bowl where it's like a traditional Rose Bowl, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, this year and next year are the last two.
Yeah, I almost wish they made it a separate thing from the expanded playoff, that they somehow separated it, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite what the right answer is. I mean, I think most people are in favor of them changing the playoff. It's just a debate of how exactly they accomplish it, because like you're saying, I mean, partially for Notre Dame fans, but any Big Ten fan will tell you, the Rose Bowl was the big one. We love playing the Big Ten. They love playing the Pac-12. It was something you really looked forward to. And it definitely lost a bit of its luster when they expanded it to be part of this whole playoff mix and match, and but it's winning the Rose Bowl is always going to be viewed in a certain higher regard compared to even other New Year's Six Bowls, I think, for Pac-12 fans.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, can we get I know you only wanted to be here for 20 minutes, so can we get your score prediction?
I got a few more minutes if you're wanting to chat,
okay.
But yeah, no one's come to drag me out of the room yet, so I think we're all right.
Okay.
Cool. I had kind of a feeling, I mean, if we're just talking everything goes, kind of plays out in a standard game, I've tried watching some Texas highlights. I do think the Huskies win. Would it shock me if Texas pulled it out? Absolutely not. They're a great team. They had a good season. I was thinking somewhere along the lines of like a 35-28, 35-24. I think it's close, and then the Huskies put it away late and score one. But something like a defensive turnover for a touchdown completely swings this one. It's going to be in the balance. It's so hard to gauge with the lack of out of conference power non-conference games, because I don't know how many Pac-12 teams played Big 12 teams in the non-conference, but it wasn't very many. So the lack of a measuring stick is tough. But
yeah, the only one we got, I think TCU Colorado is the only one we got, and that won't help us because Colorado is just that bad.
Not much of a measuring stick when an undefeated, eventually undefeated TCU beats the snot out of a Colorado team that everyone else beat the crap out of also. You hear a lot of natural smack from Big 12 fans. I am curious. I mean, I think Texas, if you just took the name away and looked at their record and their wins, it's kind of curious to see them put so highly. This is one of those ones where, yeah, it's fun. I think it feels like them shuffling the deck, so you get the Sark Bowl and the big name of Texas going into a higher tier bowl game. That's the conspiracy theory side of me, but it is what it is, and it'll be a fun matchup. But yeah, I'll call it official. I'll go 35-28 Huskies.
All right.
Oh, and before we end this interview, would you like to tell people where they can find you? To talk about the Washington Huskies, Sergeant Pickles.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's my name, Sergeant Pickles. Fair warning to everyone: I talk Huskies, Seattle sports, a lot of hockey, a lot of everything. Sorry, my son's hanging out and paying me a visit, but I'm raising him right. He's gonna be watching the game with me. Yeah, I'm
awesome.
Sergeant Pickles on Twitter, mostly talking about Seattle everything, a lot of nonsense, but it's just fun chatting with everybody.
Yeah, this is going to be such a fun game because, really, this one and my Fighting Irish bowl game against South Carolina, I feel like we really got, the closest, pretty close, evenly matched games between, ranked teams.
I think so, yeah. I would even think for a neutral, I would imagine for a neutral, Washington, Texas, after a good season from both, is a very, really good game to watch. These are two pretty historic teams.
Yeah, Sark looks like they have Texas going in the right direction, and of course, with just how surprising Washington looked this year, the Huskies really look like they're getting it on too.
Yeah, more than anything, not looking past the bowl game, it's going to be fun, win or lose, but it's just there's a ton of optimism, and hopefully it doesn't cross over into overblown expectations for next season, because all the ingredients are there to really do something amazing. I think this rebuild for me is 1 to 2 years ahead of schedule, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah, the whole conference is looking good too, with the Beavs getting DJ, the Ducks being the Ducks, the Trojans getting back to being the Trojans, Dante going to UCLA, and then Utah being Utah. So the whole conference is doing so well this year. It's a lot of fun to watch, just as a part of the show.
My bold prediction for next year: you're going to see 4 or more Pac-12 quarterbacks go in the first round of the draft. I think it's going to be that kind of year. We're talking old school Pac-12, when the offensive game for all these schools was just crazy. The downside of that is it makes all the defensive stats look really bad, but everything's relative.
Oh yeah. What's your pick for the playoff? Who's your playoff pick?
Oh goodness. You're talking individual games?
Oh yeah.
Oh goodness. Hold on. I'm just trying to think. Well, I got Georgia overall. I can't convince myself not to take Georgia.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it TCU, Georgia, Michigan? Yeah, TCU against Georgia first. I've been a little bit out of the loop, but I think Georgia, Michigan.
TCU,
Michigan. That's right. Okay, sorry. It shows how I've just been completely swamped with Christmas. But yeah, I think it'll be Michigan, Georgia. That actually is a pretty interesting, compelling game. I think Michigan gives them a run for their money, but I haven't seen anything out of Georgia to make me doubt that they're worse than they were last year. people want to pick apart Stetson Bennett and this and that. He's a serviceable quarterback. He does what he's asked. Do I think he's Heisman, candidate worthy? No, but
No. Yeah.
That team is so loaded at every position. It's hard to identify a true weakness for Georgia. So I'd have them over Michigan in the final.
Who do you think is going to be the rising star of the game for the Huskies that we haven't heard much about? Who do you think is going to be the?
That's a tough one. I mean, rising star, because everything that comes to think of. I do think one of the receivers goes off. I mean, if you want to say rising star, I would actually say a guy like Jalen McMillan. He has all the stats, but he's not talked about amongst like the best receivers in college football. Had a 1,000-yard season. I could see him going off for something like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got that long burst speed. He's got plenty of 30-plus yarders this year. So I'm going to say a guy like that where he's maybe on the edge of being well known, but he could just break a game absolutely open.
Of course.
Maybe a cheat pick, but
Yeah. So going into next year, I'm going to take a look at the schedule. You got to go to sport. Oh, you got Boise. That'll be a fun one as well.
Yeah, the former Chris Peterson Bowl.
Yeah, former
USC on your schedule. So
yep. It's a pretty interesting schedule. I can't remember off the top of my head our exact breakdown of home and away, but I think the battle for the Northwest, the Beavs, the Huskies, and the Ducks, and even the Cougars. The Cougars have a lot to be excited about too. People I think write them off more than they should. There's kind of that upper tier in the Pac-12 this year, but Wazoo was kind of just that one step behind, but far above what like a Stanford or Colorado was at. I know we got rid of divisions, but it wouldn't shock me to see whoever wins kind of the best combination of games out of the 4 Northwest schools is going to end up in the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah. It'll be your last time going to the Coliseum. Your last time.
It will. I'm going to have a lot to say to LBC and Tony that week, I tell you, no matter what.
Yeah.
A lot of talking smack about Todd Marinovich, and all I saw was purple. We'll have a fun week with that one for sure. Yeah, it'll be last trip to the Coliseum. Man, I could even maybe I'll have to talk my wife into taking a trip down there for that. That'd be a lot of fun. You got the Ducks at home. I'm trying to think all the huge home games. Do we have Boise at home or away? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
It's at home.
I want to say at home. Yeah, that'll be a rocking atmosphere because there are a ton of people from Idaho in general and Boise State fans that live in Seattle. They will absolutely turn out for that game, so the atmosphere will be really cool.
Well, Michigan State's on the road too, so
yep, that's a tough one. They're gonna want a little bit of revenge for that one, and it's definitely. The Huskies were undefeated at home. Our losses came on the road, so can you kind of throw that monkey off your back early in the season, and one of the tougher places to play in the Big Ten. It'll definitely be. It's just like this year. It's your absolute starting yardstick for what kind of season you're going to have. You get that win, you're elevated to a certain height and expectation that even national people have for your team going into the year. If you really want to be that Pac-12 contender, you got to get the win against Boise for sure, and then get that win at Michigan State, or at the very least, you better play your butts off and it come down to the wire, and you suffer a close loss on the road. You can live with that.
Yeah, I think it would be important for the Huskies to get at least one of those wins in Reeser or in the Collie would really help and then just win the rest of the games.
Yeah, the rest of the schedule, from what I remember, stacks up pretty favorably. You have the same usual suspects. I don't believe we're playing Utah. We just have SC next year. Do I have that right?
According to this website, you do play Utah at home.
Okay. Yeah, the former North and South schedule rotating kind of hurts my head sometimes. Any combination of SC and Utah, I don't see how they're going to be any worse off. You got to get at least one of those wins if you're really going to be in the title discussion, whether you get it. It's kind of crazy because it feels like every year one or two teams, like UCLA this year, they jump out of nowhere and they're in that top conversation in the pack. It's hard for me to see anyone really falling off from this year, though. I think you're gonna.
We can maybe see Arizona be better. I think maybe Arizona would be better.
True, they've been very active in the transfer portal. I mean, I don't know if they're gonna go with Jaden DeLora again, or if they have someone else coming in. He did a lot of smack talk against the Cougars and couldn't get it done. But yeah, they've definitely got ingredients, I'd say for sure, to overtake ASU and kind of maybe be more what the Cougars were this year. They're, a good, not great team, but they're not hanging around in that bottom bucket in the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
Get a couple of surprise wins in there.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, talk about that Apple Cup game. It was like back and forth at the end. Like we weren't sure.
That was the highest scoring game in the history.
Yeah.
As far as I recall.
Oh, the missed tackling made me just want to launch myself into a wall. I was so frustrated because I truly thought the Huskies were the better team and deserved the win overall. I mean, perhaps Cougar fans will disagree with me, but yeah, I think it was definitely a lot of mistakes. It came down to the wire, and credit to them, they falling behind, they never took their foot off the gas. They were going after it. Definitely caused some issues. I think Penix, it feels like he was just a step off for kind of the first half of that game. He wasn't quite hitting guys like he normally does, hitting them in. Maybe he gets the pass and he hits them, but instead of getting them in stride for a 30-yard break down the field, they're just getting, 8 to 10 yards and kind of barely moving it. Yeah, I was almost expecting kind of a crazy weather game where it was going to be snow and buckets. Those Apple Cups are always fun. But you know how it is. Rivalry games, they can kind of go wonky, even if one team is heavily favored over the other.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah, and I'm looking at these matchups between you guys did play in the Holiday Bowl where Texas did edge you guys out, but you also won in the Sun Bowl in the early Don James era, and then you guys played a couple of times before the Husky program really got going.
Yes, they did.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty big. And
oh yeah,
if you want to watch some more awesome interviews and some more shows, like, comment, subscribe here at the Young Guns. Check it out.
See you guys.
Goodbye, everyone.